Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking a look at a really interesting mix of sources.
Yeah, we've got news outlets like Times of India, NJ.com, Politico, The Daily Beast, The Independent.
And also discussions from Reddit, places like Politics, or Real Tesla, and Surfit News.
Which is often federal employees talking, so that's an interesting perspective.
Right, and our goal here is to try and understand this, well, pretty dramatic shift we've seen with Elon Musk.
Specifically, his role in the Trump administration's Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, as it was called.
He went from being, front and center to, well, seemingly fading out quite a bit. So let's dive in, see what the sources actually tell us.
Absolutely. It's quite a collection, and it definitely points to a really rapid change in his political profile.
Yeah.
The picture you get initially is someone who wasn't just involved, but maybe even pivotal early on, especially leading DOGE. And then quite suddenly, it seems, that high visibility just drops off. It raises a lot of questions, for sure.
Okay, so let's rewind to those early days. It's pretty clear from these articles, Musk wasn't just like a background figure.
No, not at all.
He was heading DOGE, and you see the photos, he was at the White House. A lot.
Yeah, Oval Office meetings, cabinet meetings, even flying on Air Force One. It paints a picture of real proximity, close ties.
Definitely.
And the sources really underline how consistent that was, in that period. Trump himself praised his hard work publicly.
Right, I remember that mention in the first address to Congress.
Exactly. And those photos, him posing with Trump and Tesla's right there at the White House, it just emphasizes that alignment.
It wasn't just symbolic either, right?
Yeah.
His name was popping up in campaign fundraising emails.
Yeah, routinely, especially back in February. It really suggests it was a relationship that seemed pretty beneficial to both sides at the time.
But then something clearly gives. The timeline seems to point towards, early April 2025?
That's what the sources suggest, yeah. Around the beginning of April seems to be the inflection point.
That's when the narrative starts to shift.
It does. And one of the clearest signs is Trump just stopped posting about Musk on Truth Social.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Politico tracked it, apparently averaging 4 posts a week, mentioning him in February and March, and then nothing since the start of April.
That's pretty telling. Silence from Trump himself on social media.
It strongly suggests, a cooling off, at least publicly.
And it wasn't just Truth Social, apparently. The fundraising emails, too.
Right. It mentions pretty much vanished from those emails around the same time, starting in March.
So it's like he just fell out of favor, suddenly.
That's what it looks like. Both the Times of India and Politico really flag that sharp drop in campaign communications. And then you hear reports from, people close to the MAGA movement saying his name's just not really mentioned anymore.
That's a big change from being a headliner just months before.
Huge change. And even the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, put out a statement about DOGE continuing its mission.
But didn't mention Musk.
Exactly. Didn't mention him by name. And add to that, him not being at cabinet meetings anymore, it just underscores this fading from the inner circle.
So, okay, the big question.
Yeah.
Why? What's behind this vanishing act almost? Sources float a few ideas.
Yeah, several possibilities. The first one, and it comes up a lot, is just his popularity or lack thereof.
Right.
He's described as deeply unpopular, even politically toxic. There's that quote, I think several places cited it from a GOP operative.
The he polls terrible. People hate him one.
That's the one. It really hits home. And that kind of unpopularity, well, it likely made him a liability for Republicans, especially if he can get the midterms.
Yeah, that makes sense. It kind of shows that success in tech doesn't just automatically translate to political love, does it?
Not at all. Very different arenas, different expectations from the public.
And that Wisconsin Supreme Court race. That seems like Exhibit A.
Oh, yeah. He apparently poured a ton of money in, over $21 million.
For a candidate who then lost, and lost significantly.
Right. It didn't exactly project power or influence. In fact, the sources say he got quite a bit of ridicule for it.
To cheesehead and handing out checks.
Yeah, apparently seen as pretty clumsy or even offensive by some. Definitely didn't buy votes, as that operative put it. Might have even backfired.
Okay, then there's the whole Tesla situation. Sources mention sales dropped.
Yeah, it's significant drop reported for the first quarter of 2025. And that hit the stock price pretty hard.
So investors probably weren't thrilled.
Likely not. And apparently Musk told investors he'd cut his DOGE work back to just 1 or 2 days a week starting in May.
Which suggests, what? He needed to get back to his main business.
It suggests maybe a need to refocus, yeah. That the political stuff might have been, well, a distraction or even actively hurting the core business, or maybe it just wasn't the priority anymore.
Then you get into the more, let's say, speculative reasons, especially looking at those Reddit threads.
Right, like in Sarfid News, some users were wondering, did he just get what he wanted?
Sort of a cynical take, but possible.
Well, the speculation there was, maybe the goal was government contracts, maybe undermining investigations into his companies, maybe data gathering.
And if you tick those boxes while leading DOGE.
Then stepping back from the spotlight would make a certain kind of sense.
And the last idea is just a strategic retreat.
Yeah.
Like maybe he's just laying low on purpose.
That's another plausible read. Just step back, let the negative attention die down a bit, maybe wait for a better moment. It could be a calculated move.
Okay, so even if he's less visible, the effects of DOGE under his leadership are still being talked about. There were some pretty big consequences mentioned.
Oh, absolutely. The legacy, or maybe the fallout, is a huge part of the discussion. The mass firings at AmeriCorps, for instance.
Right, and the big funding cuts there, too.
Huge cuts. And we're seeing reports that states are actually talking about suing because of the impact on services, like disaster relief.
Wow.
Yeah, the folks on Politics are especially concerned about what that means for those programs.
And it sounds like the changes inside agencies might be sticking around, even without Musk there, daily. Like DOGE people staying put.
That's a worrying point raised in the sources, this idea of DOGE staff being embedded and not leaving.
Suggesting that chaos, as one person apparently put it, might just continue.
That's the concern, that it could mean long-term instability or disruption in how these agencies function.
And then there's the data security angle. That pops up a lot in the online discussions.
Especially on our Politics, yeah. There was that one really concerning comment about login attempts.
From Russian IPs. Using correct credentials.
Exactly. Right after DOGE apparently got access to secure systems, and you have to assume secure systems means sensitive citizen data.
Which makes alleged login attempts like that extremely concerning.
Absolutely. And there are also questions being raised in those threads about data possibly going to xAI, Musk's AI company. Lots of unanswered questions about data use and security.
And what about the savings DOGE claimed? That $170 billion figure. People are skeptical.
There's definite skepticism. Is that number real? And even if it is it offset by, say, lost revenue because they cut IRS auditors focusing on high-income earners?
Right. Cutting auditors might save salary costs, but cost more in uncollected taxes down the line.
Precisely. It shows how hard it is to get a true net assessment of the financial impact.
It's interesting, too, that Musk apparently tried to frame all this philosophically, comparing Muskism to Buddhism.
Yeah, that was a unique comparison, saying DOGE is a way of life that continues without him.
Trying to suggest a lasting influence, maybe?
Seems like it. Whether that Muskism actually sticks in government, well, that's another question entirely.
So, less visible, but maybe not totally gone. Sources suggest he might still be involved somehow.
Yeah, a complete break seems unlikely based on these reports. He was seen with Trump in Saudi Arabia in May, so there's still some connection.
Okay.
And you see the concerns, again, in the Reddit discussions, that he could still pull strings through people he placed in agencies, his cultists, as some users called them.
And the remote access possibility.
That remains a worry for some, yeah. Could he still access systems remotely?
And politically, it sounds like, even though he's not in the headlines daily, Democrats are still using him.
Oh, definitely. He's still a useful foil, it seems, linking him to what they frame as Republican extremism.
This idea of Elon Muskism.
Exactly. Some Democratic strategists are reportedly pushing that frame. Even out of the spotlight, he's a symbol they can use in campaigns, especially in tight races.
And lastly, what about Tesla? Did all this political stuff actually hurt the brand?
It seems like it might have. The sources mentioned boycotts, the sales decrease we talked about.
And on Real Tesla, people saying they're done with the brand.
Yeah, some pretty strong statements there. People saying they'll never buy another Tesla because of his actions, his associations.
It's like that comparison someone made to Adidas and Kanye West.
Right. It shows the real risk to a brand when its main figure becomes, well, deeply polarizing or unpopular. It can hit the bottom line.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. We've gone through a lot of material here. What are the main takeaways from this deep dive on Musk fading from the political scene?
Well, I think it's clear there was a very fast, very noticeable drop in his public involvement with Trump administration and DOGE.
Yeah, definitely.
And it looks like it's driven by a mix of things, his plunging popularity, maybe the negative blowback on Tesla, and potentially, as some speculate, maybe he felt he'd achieved his goals within DOGE.
But it really sounds like even with him stepping back, the consequences of his time there are still playing out.
Oh, for sure. Especially around data access, the changes within agencies. Those are still very live issues, lots of discussion and concern there.
It's not over, even if he's not in the daily news about it.
Exactly. The long-term effects of what he started and the people still working within government from that initiative, that's all still unfolding. And those questions about data security, potential ongoing influence, they definitely haven't gone away.
So this really leaves us, and you listening, with some pretty big questions to think about. What are the lasting impacts of DOGE? On government efficiency, sure, but maybe more critically, on government security.
And how does this whole episode affect Musk himself going forward? His businesses, his public image, now that his political profile seems, well, diminished.
Yeah. And maybe the biggest question of all, what does this tell us about, this intersection of big tech, big personalities, political power, and public opinion right now? It's a complicated picture.
It really is. It pushes you to think hard about those power dynamics because while the headlines might have moved on from Musk in D.C. day to day,
right,
the ripples from his deep dive into government and then pulling back, those are likely going to be felt for a while. It's a real case study in what happens when the private sector wields that kind of influence in the public sphere. Lots to keep watching there.